Can you start with your name and a little bit about what you do and what your hobbies are? Just like an intro.
My name's Shivani Dave. Most people call me Shiv. My pronouns are they, them. I am a journalist, a radio presenter, a general freelancer in the queer utopia, so we'll do anything if you want me to have a go at it. Apart from graphic design, I've tried that and I'm not good at that. I do a whole hodgepodge of different activities and hobbies, mostly just taking something up, being really into it for 6 months and then stopping. But the one thing that is continued to be a passion is football.
Nice. Brilliant. And in that way, we can segue so neatly into, and tell me how you got into football.
I started playing football when I was really young. I have an older brother, he's just over a year older than me. And so my whole childhood I was like following after him, doing everything he did because he was like the coolest person in my mind. And he used to play football for a local youth team just down the road, and that's my cat. He used to play football for a local youth team just down the road, and for a long time I was able to go to their training. So I would like pass the ball in between cones and I would learn how to dribble, and it was really, really fun until I turned 10 and was told that I'm a girl and I can't play with the boys. I don't think it was the coach who made that rule. It felt like it was coming from someone else or somewhere else, but I was too young to interrogate what was happening at the time, and to me it just meant that I couldn't play football. So my parents tried to look into like teams for girls. There weren't any around that were just feasible for my parents to get to. What I find ridiculous is with men's football, boys, people assigned male at birth, they have like millions of options to be able to play football or most sports. And when it comes to AFAB teams or teams for people assigned female at birth, the options are so limited. Where my brother could have gone and played on any day of the week at multiple different time slots, I could only play on like a Saturday at 8 a.m, which just, for whatever reason, wasn't practical for my family. And that was really hard. So I stopped playing football. I tried to do all the other sports that I could think of. I tried to play cricket for a bit. I tried netball, hockey, lacrosse, rounders, all of the things that I could think of, and none of them really clicked in that same way. So I went to university and I had this like great big idea of like joining university football team. But when I got there, I was so overwhelmed with the possibility that there's this thing that I've been hoping to be able to be a part of for so long that I might not be any good, or I might not be welcome in that space. So I just didn't do it and didn't play football because I thought, if I don't try then I can't fail. And there's like a lot of other stuff going on at university, like finding out your identity, coming out, all of that other stuff was going on in my life. But then after COVID, I'd come out as non-binary, and I was kind of just like, this whole horrible experience of lockdown after lockdown and death and all of this stuff that was going on, I was just like, things are too short. Like, life is too short to have this thing that I want to try and for whatever reason hold myself back from that opportunity, because really at that point the only person standing in my way was me. And so I looked at different teams I could join. I wanted to find a team that was LGBTQ plus inclusive, not just sort of friendly. I wanted them to like celebrate that part of the community, a team that aligned with some of my social values. So the team that I play for now is called Gold Diggers FC, and we operate on like a sliding scale, so people who don't have the financial means can still access football. It's a completely inclusive place for trans and non-binary players. It's a completely inclusive place for people of different religious backgrounds or ethnic minority backgrounds, and all of those things are really important to me. So I was so lucky, or I feel so lucky, to have found my people and my place.
Yeah, before I go into any like more cerebral questions, just can you tell me a little bit about how Gold Diggers operates, and also like what it is that you, I mean, you've already said a little bit what you like about it, but just, yeah, how it feels to be on that team.
Yeah, so I was looking at teams to join and clubs to be a part of. For me, I think there's a combination of things going on. Like, it can be really hard to find friends when you're an adult, and you'd want friends outside of your work scenarios. So I thought, you know what, hopefully this is something that I'll really enjoy and be able to form a friendship group out of it. So I was looking for a club that had similar values to me, hoping that the people would have similar values to me, and I really lucked out with this club. So um, in every way that you think some group might try to be like as inclusive as possible, this club really does try to do that. So there are like reserve spots for people who traditionally would have had a tougher time getting into football. For example, trans women, non-binary players, players of colour. There's a whole range of different levels, tiers of football that you can play, from like never having kicked a ball in your life to have been the captain of your university team and being really pro and just wanting to keep up with football and not really have to go down the like trying to be professional level. So there's a whole range of people that play at all different levels. There's a payment scale. So to join a football club, it's really expensive to play football. You need the boots, you need the kits, you need the pitch space, you need the balls, you need the coaches. All of these things really add up. So what the club does is operates on a sliding scale. So people who can afford to pay more do pay more quite often. And the people who can't necessarily afford to pay as much pay what they can. So it goes all the way up to like you can play football for £0, 0 pence to however much you can afford to give. And all that money goes into operating the club, and what's done within that is people are given their kits, people are given like any equipment they might need. So if for whatever reason you don't have access to football boots, or you can't get your hands on a pair of keeper gloves or shin pads or whatever, there's a whole structure that's built into the framework of the club that allows people to access that equipment. And also there's the social side of things. So I loved it so much I became the social sec of the club, which means I get to organise all the times we hang out, basically, which is really fun. We try and do something officially every month, which could include going to watch a football game, particularly now that women's football is becoming more and more popular and the games are being held in stadiums that are more centrally located. We've been organising trips to go and see them play. It can mean we get some pizza at a pub and people just go hang out and eat pizza. We've done karaoke nights, a whole range of things. And what's great about it is because of the ethos of the club, all of these spaces that we create, right now, I think in 2023, there aren't many safe spaces for the trans community, for POC communities, for queer communities more largely. And I think this kind of group of people who have this same ethos go, and by being in a space, we create the environment that we want. So while there aren't those bricks and mortar safe spaces, we create that safe space wherever we go, and it's kind of forever moving and ethereal like that.
So that was a great description. I love that. There's a whole like don't go too deeply into queer theory about notions of like non-temporality and things, but another time. Ethereal is a great description. Cool. I would love to go a little bit into like because you've just described this really gorgeous space. There are some clubs that are trying, we hope sincerely, to become more inclusive of, I'm just saying trans people for a moment, because what they often don't seem to realise is that, you know, like what you were saying, they can't just say, oh, we're trans friendly. They also need to think about more complex intersectional things around that, also like within being trans and also within overlapping identities. and things like finances. So what do you think perhaps is more important? Do you think it's more important that these clubs that we hope are really trying and maybe not quite getting it right yet, that they listen and learn and do the work and become these actual places that people can join and feel good in and want to play in? Or do you think that there's better work being done in just wholesale creating our own spaces? Or a bit of both?
Do you want me to use the question in the answer?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I think when it comes to having football clubs that are not just trans friendly but trans inclusive, I think even trans inclusive is maybe the wrong word. It's like the club that I'm part of is trans championing. So it's like not just saying if you're trans you can be here and you're welcome. It's like if you're trans and you're in this space, or even if you're not in this space, if you're trans, we are going to be there for you. We're going to be your fighters. And like for the last couple of years, we've been going as a club to Trans Pride, and that is one of the biggest days for the members of our club to just go to that as a social event, as a group, as a team. It's really brings us all together in a really beautiful way. I think there are clubs out there who are trying to be trans inclusive, and it's great that clubs say that they support trans people playing football and playing sport more generally. But what are they doing to ensure that that is not just paying lip service? Some of the things that we do is we only play in leagues, or we make it very clear that we play in leagues where trans women are allowed to be a part of the league. So the FA actually don't allow trans women to play in FA affiliated tournaments or leagues. So we play in leagues so that trans women who are part of the club can also play in the games that we play. We also have non-binary players, and what we'll do is say, instead of, okay, girls, let's go get on the pitch, which is a very condescending way that women in football are spoken to, which is a whole other issue. But, you know, as a team, as a club, we use words like players, teammates. We call each other goals, which sounds a bit like girls, but it's sort of an abbreviation of goal diggers. We do everything we can to use gender neutral language to refer to people. We do names and pronouns to see how people want us to refer to them in the space that we're in, as opposed to the assumptions based on how they might look or dress or present. And we also ask other teams that we play with and the referees who aren't part of our club to adhere to these kinds of, not rules, but boundaries. And sometimes people slip up and sometimes people get it wrong, and that happens, and it's okay to make mistakes. But what will happen if the referee, for example, gets it wrong and misgenders somebody on the pitch, the captain from our side might go over to the referee and say, just a heads up, we did go through this, but like, I know you probably didn't mean it, probably force of habit, but just a heads up for next time, or maybe you could apologise, or whatever it is. And people seem to be very willing to learn. I think a lot of people in the real world that I meet on a day-to-day basis want to learn more about trans issues and trans experiences. So if you are part of a club that wants to do something like that, it's really worthwhile speaking to other clubs and teams that have done it and are sort of leading the way in that path and that journey, to see what they're doing that you can then start to pick up on. Or don't bother paying the lip service, I think is what I would say. I think there's also a combination of there is a need for people in a decision-making tier of whatever club it is, if they are going to say that they are LGBTQ plus friendly, or they are trans inclusive, or whatever label they want to, anti-racist, or whatever they want to give themselves a label of. I think there's an element where those clubs need to have input at that top level from people who have those experiences and are having those experiences. it's not enough to say, if you're a trans woman or a non-binary player and you want to play on this team, you can join us, because they need to also be able to have a voice in how the club as a whole is shaped and operates to best allow them to feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah. I agree.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, it's great. Complete other tangent for a second. First of all, what position do you play? Or what position do you prefer to play in?
Oh, I'm a switch. No. When I started football, I really thought, like, oh, I'm going to be a striker. I'm going to, like, go for all the goals, and I'm going to be, like, running around the pitch and, like, screaming my head off, and it'll be great. And I actually really like defending, which I'm, like, kind of embarrassed about, because I'm like, I thought I had striker ego, and now I'm realising that actually I'm a much better defender, and I'm playing to my strengths as a defender. And what I love is when you've got a really big, fast striker, like, pelting towards me. And I'm quite small. I'm 5'2.5", and that half is very important. I'm quite small, and I don't necessarily look the most athletic when I'm on the pitch, because there are people of all abilities, like I say. I'm kind of short, and there's a striker, like, coming straight towards me, and I just kind of flick the ball out from, and it's, oof. It's a really good feeling, like being that last line of just, ooh, feels cheeky.
It's great. Also, because, I mean, one of the great things about football is that I think it wants a lot of different kinds of people in it to be like an actual good cohesive team. And it's theoretically, it could have that kind of inclusivity built into its, like, very bones as a sport, if we're doing it right. Also, I'm also a defender.
Yes.
I was just like, because I've been asking everybody this question, and I've been like, okay, I'm building a fantasy football team, even though I live in Leeds, and everybody that I've talked to so far is in London. But it's fine.
We'll meet in the Midlands.
We'll meet in Birmingham? I don't know.
Somewhere. We'll find somewhere.
And so far everybody's said a different position, but they've all been sort of near the sort of
top half,
midfields or strikers, and I've been like, hi.
Yeah. I just won't go in goal.
No, I'm not afraid of the ball. I feel like, no, it's not.
I forget in goal that I can use my hands. So sometimes we'll do, like, a rotating goalkeeper, and I forget that I can use my hands, and I'm just there, like, watching it sort of fly past me, like, oh, I could have done that. Yeah, it's just, goal is not for me.
No, I don't know what it is. I just don't think that I have the, like, I don't know what it is, because, like, yes, I have reflexes, I can play, but I don't know, with goal I'm like, oh, the ball's coming toward, I'm supposed to do something.
Yeah. It really feels like people who are goalkeepers have a completely different way of seeing the whole game, I think. They're the real heroes.
Yeah. Can I ask you a little bit about the leagues that you've played in? Just what they were, and what kind of experiences you've had, positive and negative, or if you just want to do one or the others. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've played in, okay, so this is my amateurness coming out. I've played in a couple of five-a-side leagues around London, and mostly have not been, like, a fixed member of the team. What will happen is someone will say, there'll usually be, like, a list of 8 people who are like, we're the ones who are going to sign up for this league every week, and I will, usually what's happened the very few times I have played in a league game is I will be drunk on a Friday night or Saturday night and look at the notifications in the app that we have, and someone will say, oh no, we've got a sickness, or someone's like, you're not able to play anymore, can anyone do it? And I'll be like, have I got the player for you? And I'm then waking up, setting my alarm for like 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning and thinking, why did I do this to myself? Great way to work off a hangover. Like, run around for an hour or so and it will just sweat out of you. But, yeah, I don't know why I do that to myself. It's like punishment to myself. I don't know why I do that like that. But the experiences that I've had in the leagues that I've played in have been really good. People have always been like happy to check your names and pronouns. They're happy to share theirs. If people get it wrong or forget, they ask. Very vocal, very open. It makes me feel like when we actually get down to playing the game, it's so much more enjoyable for me, because the space feels like one where I don't need to pretend to be someone I'm not or embarrassed about who I am. And even if people do get it wrong in the heat of the moment, you've met somebody 5 seconds ago and you're marking against them and you use the wrong pronoun for them, largely I think you can tell when that's meant accidentally or meant maliciously. It's never been malicious when it's been in that sort of situation. And the other teams that we play with tend to also have very similar ethoses. So it's been a really good experience. I know not all leagues are like that though. I know that there are some in London that have had issues with transphobia, and we as a club have chosen not to play in any of those leagues. We were a member of one of those leagues, so we were competing in one of those leagues I think 2 years ago, and then there was a big issue with transphobia in that league and we decided to pull out, because this is what I mean about being a club that isn't just trans friendly, it's trans championing. Even if there were no trans players who are going to play in any of those games in that league, it's just not the value system that we uphold in Gold Diggers.
And also, I guess, like, I mean, not just as players, but I guess also as, like, supporters. You want trans people to be able to come and support matches without thinking, oh, members of this team are transphobic, or this referee is transphobic, or supporters on the other side of being transphobic. Like, it's... the supporters matter as well.
Yeah, for sure. And whoever it is that comes to watch, like, they're usually friends of us who play, so they usually have a similar vibe. So it's usually just a really nice environment. Sometimes people's parents come down with their, like, family dog, and it's very sweet, and we all go out afterwards for a bite to eat or something, and it's really lovely. And that is something... It feels like a community. It's not just a part of the queer community or the trans community or for me, a South Asian community. It's like a smushing together of all of those things, which is really lovely. And I've been focusing lots on, like, talking about the trans experience within the club and the queer experience within the club, but as a person of colour as well within the club, it's a really great space. I think football on the whole, particularly women's football, so basically non-men's football, can still be perceived as very white and very middle class because of the access restrictions to being able to play. Being a person of colour, I remember the day when I went to my first training session. So cringe. I was so excited. The night before, I, like, laid out my shorts and my t-shirt that I had to wear. We had to wear black t-shirts. So I laid it all out the night before so that I could wake up in the morning and put it on. And training was at, like, 7 p.m. So I was, like, all day working from home in my little football kit. Like, you know, children when they, like, wear the whole... It was so cringe. And I was, like, my big old age of 24, 25. And I was so excited to finally play football. I was also kind of dreading it because I was like, this is going to be a space where I know everyone's probably going to be quite well off. They're all probably going to be white. Their experience is not going to be what my experience is, basically. And I rocked up and I was so pleasantly surprised that was not... all the assumptions that I had made were not the case. Because I think navigating queer spaces... as a trans person of colour, you often have to think about the intersection of not being white in those spaces and how your experience is shaped somewhat by that. So I was prepared to brace myself for, like, oh, okay, I'm probably going to be the only brown person here. And it wasn't the case, and I loved that because it's meant that, you know, if I've taken a couple of weeks off training to do some stuff with my family that's, like, cultural or religious... people the next week will say like, oh, how was that festival you went to, or like, what was that like? And it's a real cross-cultural exchange from all different backgrounds. Finding friends who have shared values but different experiences, I think, is so important in terms of like learning more about the world and just everyone in it.
I think a lot of what's been coming up as well with this is football is like a microcosm of a wider potential, should we say, of like, oh, if it's actually a place that's accessible to people, then it's a place where you can just actually meet people and you can learn things and you can share your own experiences. And I think that ethos, if we're for a second just going to acknowledge that there is a non-conversation happening in which some people are saying some really stupid things, and a lot of what I feel like when I've deigned to even pay attention to anything they're saying is that their ethos feels so entirely different from anything that, you know, I've before this anecdotally been hearing trans people say, and also in like in podcasts and in news reports that come from trans spaces, and now through this, is that they're very focused on like, well, the point of sports is that we're going to find the best athletes in the world and then we're going to make sure that they win. And so if trans women or trans men on testosterone are playing, then that'll upend the entire concept of, I don't know, winning or so. Like it's
yeah, they sort of see it as doping or some sort of like cheat or hack or whatever, that you're kind of breaking the barriers. But yeah, there's people out there who do think that playing sport and being an athlete of any sort is about finding like the perfect human physical form who can achieve anything through sheer willpower and muscle strength.
Until they turn 30 and then they're like disabled for life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just not the case. Yes, obviously there are athletes who play like that and whose whole jobs and careers it is to do that. There are American football players who get hit in the head repeatedly that they end up with brain damage by the time they're 35 and can't do much else after that. But there are also people who just want to play sport to have a bit of fun, to be part of a community, to make some friends, to run around, stay fit. You know, on the one hand, we hear all of this stuff about how sport is supposed to be really good for your mental health and how there's this big mental health crisis, and that particularly affects trans people and queer people. And on the other hand, people are saying, well, you shouldn't be able to play if you're trans. But it's like, no, hold on, this is supposed to be something that's good for me and my mental health, and I want to play for fun. And it's this whole, it makes no sense to me, because it's policing what other people are doing to make you, who is completely irrelevant to the situation, feel better? Like feel like a big strong person for excluding one, but like it's like kind of like playground bully tactics. You can't play with us because it's my ball that I brought to school and you're not allowed to play with my football, kind of thing. It makes no sense. There's no real justification for it. And even when you think about professional level athletes who are trans and are competing in the spaces that they're in, I think it's really interesting at the moment. I don't know of any trans women who are playing football in that sort of level of semi-pro or professional. But there is a trans man who, I think he's semi-pro, called Parker, and he plays for a women's team. He's allowed to play for a women's team. He's not on hormones. He has fully socially transitioned. His teammates all see him as a man. He is a man who plays on a women's team. I think that is a really interesting example of how these sort of binaries within football are outdated and kind of make no sense. And I think he's doing incredible things. He's absolutely phenomenal and hilarious. I don't know him personally, I just follow him on TikTok. And then in Canada, there's a non-binary player called Quinn, who again plays on a women's team, but is completely supported by their teammates. It can be really, really hard watching them play and hear a commentator misgender them, particularly being non-binary, and particularly like wanting to feel like there's space for you in this sport, and hearing that from a top level can be really hard. But from a grassroots level, that's not what's happening. There's a lot more support on a grassroots level than there is from the top down. And that's a really encouraging space to be a part of, because yeah, we might not be getting, you know, big contracts or televised deals or whatever, but we are getting to enjoy the sport and be a part of it and be included and celebrated within that. I think there's also a whole other conversation to be had about the inclusivity of LGBT people in women's football versus men's football. There's also a whole conversation to be had about all of the different elements of all the different intersectionalities as well on top of all of that. But yeah, it's a strange space to be in, because these are people there are people out there who are saying things that will absolutely never affect their lives, but can really take away something important in somebody else's life because of their own personal bigotry. And that's not how I was raised.
So that's a really good way of being like, who raised you? Were you raised in a barn?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, oh gosh, there's a couple of things I want to pull up from that. Also, I want to mention there's a third person who, I believe he's a trans guy, called Kumi Yokomoto, I think his name is. And he plays currently in New Jersey, I think, but he's played in Japan and Germany and America.
Internationally,
yeah. So he's also talked a little bit about that he didn't want to come out until he didn't want to come out in Japan. I think he came out in Germany, and then he was like, I will play on a women's team until I no longer have aged out football, and then I will do, then I'll transition.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's these little interesting pockets that are definitely happening, and they seem to be happening in women's football specifically. Because I mean, men's professional football isn't even there aren't even really out gay football players at the top levels.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, if you're looking at the Champions League or the Premier League, there's no LGBT representation of any sort in the men's game really, which is really hard. But I think within the women's football space, there's just an interesting. Well, I wouldn't even say it's interesting. It's just it's a matter of circumstance and privilege as well, to a degree, where the players who can say, I'm out, I'm trans, this is me, a man or a non-binary person, I'm gonna socially transition and wait until I can medically transition. Not that medical transition is the end goal for lots of people, but the people who say that they will wait and they want to wait, there's a level of privilege in that. I know it's difficult. I'm not saying that you've got it easy, but there is a level of privilege in that, where for some other people, they don't have the option of waiting 6, 7, 10, 15, however long your career might be in football, to wait to retire from the sport and then transition. Because for some people, the dysphoria or whatever else they've got in their life might mean that they physically have to do that to actually be who they are, and to be safe and taken care of. And it's great that the people who are out socially transitioned can do that. It's fantastic, and I love seeing that. And it's one of the things that I like, that the women's game allows space for people who can do that. I'd like it to be a little bit better, but at the moment, when the rest of the world is so transphobic, it's great to see a bit of representation in this tiny space. But it's one of those things where just because a couple of people have done it and are doing it doesn't mean that's the right solution for everybody who is going to want to play football and who is also trans.
Yeah, there's the weird obsession with testosterone as a whole thing.
So even within football spaces, I think that's really important. Like I was saying about how if you're going to have trans players on your team, you need to let them be a part of that voice and decision-making process. It's like that with all levels of society. Like, football is a microcosm of everything else. People from all backgrounds with all experiences enjoy the sport, and in having people who are part of the communities that you want to have involved, that they need to be able to have some sort of voice, whether that's in football at a grassroots level or a professional level, or in politics, in workplaces, in whatever it might be. The people who you are trying to communicate with and like have involved and included need to be a part of the conversation in the way that you go about making those things happen.
Yes, that's a really good point, and I think it ties a little bit into what I'm going to say, but like I think with football and rugby, which I feel like are the two in this country that get most focus. I'm sure that I know that there are archaic rulings happening across the sports everything.
Yeah.
But it seems like the conversation is very again, I say conversation. It's not a conversation. The bullshit is
the tribal chanting.
Yes, yeah. is very focused, especially on football and rugby. And football and rugby is like, it's a national pastime. It's a very big part of the national culture. And so by saying, oh, we're not going to let these demographics come in, either by directly saying trans women can't play, or by saying if you take testosterone you have to disclose and you have to join a men's team that is probably going to be mostly, if not entirely, cis, thereby putting yourself in danger, and thereby obviously you wouldn't want to join. You're actually saying, actually, we just don't want you participating in our cultural pastimes. We just don't want you participating in our social and political spaces. Which on that note, and you've talked a lot about this already, but in a general sense, in a, let's say, utopian sense, I'm saying 50 years from now, because
hopeful.
I'm hopeful. What do you think would be like the ideal sort of setup in terms of like the kind of teams that are available, maybe the kind of leagues that are being played, whether it's like an all-inclusive space in which everyone has done the work, or whether it's about setting up lots of different kinds of spaces for different communities, or like a mix of the two, and also, what would you prefer?
I think when it comes to football, sadly, I think in this country, many of the big institutions are so deeply entrenched in our culture and society, and so financially backed in whatever way that may or may not be shady, that there's as much as I would like to, it feels like there's no way of tearing them down and starting again, which is what I would like. I would like that to happen in more places than just football. The police, maybe, could be one. I'm not sure if you want to include that.
To you.
I
do agree.
It's fine. I said it. I believe it. I think with institutions in this country, so much of what they are based on is the fact that they just exist, they have all the power, they've got like a monopoly on what it is, and that they're the ones sort of saying, this is how we've decided it's going to be done and this is how it will be done forever. I don't think it needs to be the case. I think ideally start them from scratch and build them from the ground up, looking at some of the successful methods that are being done already in like grassroots levels and community-led projects, football projects and things like that. It's not just trans issues and like homophobia and things like that are affecting football. There's the anti-racism campaigns, there's anti-sexism campaigns that are being run through football, and these are all part of a culture that has been so normalised and allowed to exist that doesn't need to be that way. So I think start from scratch, build it up, brick by brick, have the voices in there that are already doing the work and already doing things in a really successful way that are being inclusive and not taking anything away from the enjoyment of the game. If anything, it just allows even more people to enjoy the sport. but in a reality sense, I think, for me personally, at a grassroots level, I would like to see more clubs taking initiative and speaking out for when they are unhappy with the way things are being run, whether that's like top-down rules from the FA that are being enforced in grassroots Sunday kickabout type things, or if that's, you know, one league has a particular referee or a manager that is transphobic, or, you know, has made players feel unwelcome, for those teams to be vocal in saying, like, we don't tolerate this in the sport that we want to play, so either you get out or we'll find something else and build something else amongst ourselves. And when it comes to the shaping of the way football is played, I think there are like thousands of different ways to make the game fun. Whether it's like everyone's mixed on a team and it doesn't matter what your background is, what your sexuality or your gender identity is. There's that, which I think could be really fun and interesting. You know, they do that in exhibition matches to raise money for charity every now and then. I think every year there's a big match where like different celebs, men and women, get involved and they play against men and women. And I say that because I don't think there have been any non-binary players in any of those games, but why not? I think those are really fun. We could do something like that. I think at a professional level that might be tricky because of the ways in which like people have access to the sport and people are allowed to train and play, and I think it can get quite complicated. But I think at like a level at which most people are gonna benefit is play based on your ability. Like, play, if you've never kicked a ball, whether you're a man, woman, non-binary person, like, and you want to play football, why should you not be able to play against other people who have never kicked a ball before? If you've never kicked a ball before, but you have been a long distance runner for 10 years and you've got that great stamina, would it not be better for you to then play with people who have great stamina but not great football skills? And I think there are definitely enough people in this country and around the world who have enough of an interest in football to always find the tribe that you are part of. And if there isn't one that already exists, like, set one up. If it's, you know, I'm the kind of person who only wants to play five-a-side, go and join a five-a-side league of people who have a similar ability to you. So you know, it's fun for you because you don't feel like you're going to get, you know, completely walked all over on the pitch, because that's no fun for anyone, whether you're a fan or whether you're a player. Or if you're really good, then go and play with a team that's really, really good, because you don't want to feel like you're playing sport and it's actually a walk in the park. You want a little bit of challenge, a little bit of something. I think ability-based football is the way to go. And I think things can be looked at on like a case-by-case basis. We see new rules coming in from World Athletics banning cis women from competing in their chosen athletic sport unless they reduce their testosterone levels. These are not women on HRT. These are not women who have anything medically, like needing correction or whatever it is. They are perfectly healthy cis women who have higher levels of testosterone than the standard average that these people have plucked out of where. And those kinds of things are really, really harmful, because it's sort of medicalising what it means to be a woman. I think that is a very dark and slippery road to go down, and I think it's never going to move the sport that you were part of or society at large in a progressive direction. There's all this other stuff about whether or not these ideals of the bands of testosterone that you can be sort of within to compete as a woman in a women's category are based on internalized racism and all of the other bad isms as well. So there are significant issues with doing the medicalisation route. So I just think, let people play and enjoy, and most people want to, I'd say 99% of people who play sport aren't doing it to be a professional athlete. So why the 99% of people who are involved in sport having to navigate rules that professional athletes themselves have trouble navigating, and that's their full-time job.
Yeah. I think the policing of testosterone levels in women, I think, is one of the clearest overlaps I think I've seen of like transphobia, misogyny, racism, intersexism, just all coming together in the worst possible way it could.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish that more like cis women athletes were like professional athletes were being like, oh, this is horrifying, but
yeah, I think the conversation really kicked off around that, the whole idea that cis women have to have testosterone levels below a certain point, when Caster Semenya was found to have high testosterone levels, and these were her naturally occurring hormone levels within her body. She was assigned female at birth. She is a woman by all accounts, and she's never said anything contrary to otherwise. She's never injected herself with testosterone, because I understand the idea that like sport has strict rules around things like doping, and testosterone injections can be seen as one method of doping within women's sport. I understand how that's the case and how that's been something that's ongoing as a discussion. I don't know if it necessarily... Well, I actually 100% don't think that we have found the answer. Because if the answer is we exclude people, or we make them take hormonal medication that they don't need and don't want, that just can't be the answer. It can't be the right answer.
I mean, it's dangerous as well, like taking those kind of hormones when you don't need them in order to regulate one's body in that way. Like there's side effects. There's ways that it changes. There's
always going to be a side effect with any sort of drug. So the fact that there is somebody who is like a top of their game athlete who is being forced to do this just so that they can compete or continue to compete in something that they have trained so hard for their whole life, and it's without a doubt that Caster Semenya, for example, is an incredible athlete, and the fact that because she was too good, people were like, hold on a minute, are you enough of a woman? It's absolutely mind-boggling.
It's baffling.
Good. I hope she's actually taking that HRT and giving it to trans people who can't access it.
That's direct action.
That's
mutual aid.
Yeah. So like on her records, it's like, well, she picked them up from the pharmacy, and someone else has suddenly
and a wonderful trans woman down the road is getting access to some things otherwise.
Yeah, she's got her estrogen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, that's a little bit of a well, it's not really a side note because not a side note, but like it's not really a tangent, but it does relate to all of this.
Yeah.
I just a lot of the time I'm just like, oh, I don't want to get too much into it because it's just gonna get so frustrating because it's like we know that it can be better.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard topic to discuss because there are so many things that intersect with it. It's not just about whether or not I as a non-binary person feel comfortable in playing football. It's about all of the different elements of the communities that are affected and impacted by the way football is structured at the moment, and it doesn't have to be like that. And it's not just football, it's like all of the different sports and all of the different conversations going on, because they all look at what each other are doing and then they base what they do based on the other people. And if person A over here gets it wrong and person B decides to copy person A, then it's all just going to be wrong, and that's kind of how it feels it's going at the moment.
Whereas like what's interesting about the grassroots football is that obviously there's when it's doing it well, even in when it's not necessarily succeeding the first time around or whatever. There's an interesting queer theory going into it where, I'm like, oh, a microcosm of the way that queer theory can have a positive impact on how we structure our society, and ways in which maybe cisgender straight people need to be looking at, like, rather than trying to make queer people assimilate into cisgender straight structures, actually being like, actually maybe we need to be more like that. Maybe we need to be learning from what queer theory is saying.
Yeah, I think
queer feminist theory.
Yeah, I think with queer theory, there's always been the idea that breaking down the cisgender heteronormative rules that have been placed on us in this society that we live in not only benefits LGBTQ plus people, but it benefits straight and cis people at the same time, because they don't feel like they have to abide by these sort of society expectations of gender norms and how they dress and present. And like, my dad last year at a wedding wore nail polish for the first time ever, and it wasn't that long since I'd come out, and we'd been having more and more discussions about queer theory and expression and presentation, and I was saying that, like, sometimes I actually like to dress in a more feminine way and I enjoy that, but I still don't want to be read as a woman. And he was trying to get his head around that, and he was like asking all these questions, and it was really great to have that conversation, because it really felt like, oh, this is somebody who never had to think about this stuff, but actually is seeing the benefits of a more queer community, being able to allow yourself to express in ways that you'd been told you weren't allowed to. And you should have seen my dad at this wedding. He was walking around like he was the bride. He was there like, look at my nails, all my nails. And it was so lovely. It was great. And loads of people, of course they didn't get it. Loads of people were like, that's weird. But he was really feeling himself. And like, you know the like nail emoji, the like slay one? That was basically him. And that's such a great thing to see, like, a nearly 60-year-old middle-aged straight man do.
Sorry, this is completely side almost. Did he get them done, or did he do them himself?
He did them himself.
Love that.
Yeah, but since then he's gone back to like get them done at a salon.
Brilliant. Okay, sorry, just very happy for your dad.
Yeah,
that's great. I hope that I get to that level of comfort, because I've like gone very far in one direction. Now I'm slowly like, oh, femininity is actually quite nice on my own terms.
Yeah, it's like, and all the idea that there's like femininity and masculinity, it's like, but why? Like, surely just wear what you're comfortable with and don't have the rules of like, oh well, boys can't wear skirts, or like girls can't do this, and it's like, that's ridiculous and stupid. And do you understand that these rules are actually just meaning that some people aren't able to enjoy things that they might have wanted to?
Girls can play football and deserve to have funding put into. I mean, I think as well, like the issues that exist just on a tangible level in terms of like accessibility for trans people, for people of color, for disabled people, and for women, like in a lot of ways, they very, like, when it comes down to it, it's like, it's funding, it's learning what kind of language is needed, it's figuring out how we can get people to the pitch, like it's the same questions, like if we were all like coming at it from this intersectional perspective.
Yeah, Gold Diggers is amazing, and I love it, but there are things that could always be improved. For example, we train on a Wednesday night from 7 till 9 p.m. Usually there's the option to go and get pizza afterwards with the rest of the team. Everyone is then going back to their own houses or flats in different parts of London. So some people are lucky enough to live quite close to where we train. Lots of people have to travel for like an hour afterwards. Like, so you finish football at 9, you finish eating your pizza like 10:30 maybe, then you head home, you're travelling an hour home. Luckily I'm not in this position, but you know, there are lots of people on the team who do have like a long journey home. In the middle of winter, when it's cold, dark, raining, you're a woman potentially by yourself, travelling home at 10:30 on a weeknight. can feel really unsafe, and for lots of people would feel really unsafe. So why then is our training put at that time? Well, because we can't get any slots to train at the weekend because it's all booked up with men's teams. We're the only team that is not a men's team who play on the pitch that we play on. And this is a complete tangent, but a couple of weeks ago I dropped my house keys and I thought I'd left them on the pitch. So I went to the man in the building that has all the people who work on the park and the parks and services people, and I said, I think I left my keys on the pitch, hopefully they're still there, do you mind if somebody unlocks it for me and I can take a look around? And I was going around with this guy who was saying, oh, so you're the... He got it wrong. He was like, oh, you're the ladies team, aren't you? And I was like, yes, I'm part of the team Gold Diggers. And he was saying how we're the only non-men's team on that pitch, and we are the only team that everybody who works at that park wants to be the one who's like on clean-up duty afterwards, because we are the only team that picks up all of our water bottles, any rubbish. You know, we don't leave the pitch in complete mess. We basically, I didn't think anything that we were doing was like abnormal. You just pick up after yourself, right? You're courteous. You just leave things how you found them, kind of vibe. And that's not the case for a lot of people who take having access to these spaces for granted. Yeah, but tangent, sorry, but...
No, this is, I mean, to go back to, like, I guess the more personal as well, because I know we've been getting quite, like, we've been talking about politics and quite, like, broad things, so I appreciate an anecdote just as it is, because I'm going to ask you about one in a moment anyway.
Okay.
But also, like, just in terms of you, actually, very quickly, this isn't really necessarily relevant to you, so I don't know if you'd even know, but do you know if any of those men's teams are trans-inclusive?
I don't know if they are. I would assume they're not.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just, like, if you did happen to know, I was like, oh, I can ask.
I know that there are a couple of trans-inclusive football teams. There's, like, obviously trans men inclusive football teams, like, obviously Truck. I think there's Stonewall FC, where I think there's a couple of trans guys who play, but I'm not 100% sure.
So is Gold Diggers just basically not just anybody who's not a guy?
Yes. So we had a discussion about it, because at the moment it's like trans and non-binary players free to join us. We've only ever had trans women join the team, and we have lots of non-binary players. I think as of yet there are no trans men who have either wanted to join, applied to join, or transitioned during, like, their period of time on the team. So I would really like to think that if I, for example, was a trans man, they wouldn't be like, you're kicked off the team now. I do think it would impact certain leagues that we play in because of some of the FA stuff. If it's a football affiliated league, I think it would affect that if I was on testosterone, for example. But I don't think that it's just not happened. So it's not been a situation that, like, I know what the answer would be. But I think at the same time, knowing the people who are in charge, we would probably just be like, okay. But it is sort of painted as like a women and non-binary team. So I'm not sure if a trans guy would necessarily want to be part of that team, or he might feel more comfortable being on, like, a guy's team.
It kind of goes back to the earlier question about, like, what kind of ideal spaces would exist. Like I think I've talked to a few people now, and there are some people, like some guys who've been like, oh, I prefer to be on a men's team, and then there are some guys who've been like, I prefer to be on a lesbian team actually, and so it's like I think, not to put any words in anybody's mouth, including yours, but I'm like, okay, seems like the answer is lots of different teams.
Yeah, I think lots of different teams is the way to go, and, like, let people make the decisions for themselves, and, like, let it be a case by case thing. Like, you know, if if I was going to be playing football, like that's exactly how I approached it. I was like, here are all the teams that I can join, here are all the things that they stand for, here are all the locations where they're based, like this is the vibe, which team do I want to be on? And I think that's the way to go. I think while there are more and more teams popping up all the time, there can always be more, and like there should be more, and people can, like, the more that there are, the more places people will be able to feel like they can be a part of that community.
And maybe also, I don't know, create leagues outside of the FA, because then one isn't bound by the same BS. Yeah, basically. Whether cis men are actually having this conversation at all or not is...
It's kind of nuts, because so many cis guys that I know just have like their 5-side leagues that they play in and they're part of, and nobody thinks twice about it. Whereas women, non-binary, trans people playing football, everyone thinks it's like this new groundbreaking thing, when it's been happening for as long as time. As long as football was invented, there were people of all genders kicking balls.
There is a ball on the
floor.
Like,
yeah.
What are you gonna do?
You kick it.
I'm reminded of the fact that actually there was a brief time that I went to a school that for some reason banned football, so everyone was playing football with tennis balls. It's also an experience. I was really bad at it because they are small.
Yes, yes. But probably quite painful if you get it in the face as well.
It was, and like you can't kick him as hard. It's no good. But it's like, there's a ball on the ground. You're gonna kick it.
You're gonna kick it.
And like, we've given you tennis balls. You can do other things. And it was like, no, we're gonna play football. Actually. Anyway, cool. We're nearing the end.
Cool.
Just a couple of questions. We've kind of gone in and out of this as well, but just very simply, like, what is your favourite thing about playing football?
I think it's being part of... My favourite thing about football is probably being part of a community that I feel like I can go to and turn to for whatever it is. Like, whether it is I am raising money for gender affirming care, and I know there's going to be a team of people who, if they can't donate themselves, they will spread the word and help out, or come along to a fundraising event. Or if it's I want to run for 5k on a Sunday afternoon and none of my other friends want to do it, there's someone at football who will be up for a 5k. It's definitely, for the record, I don't want to run a 5k on a Sunday afternoon, but there, you can get anything from this group of people. They're like inbuilt friends, and it's this community where you don't have to explain everything. I rock up and, like, the assumption is that I am who I say I am. There are no awkward questions. It's just a really nice space where you can be yourself and be celebrated for that.
Yeah, could you, if you have anything that you want to share, could you just give me like an anecdote about something that's happened related to football that was great or funny or surprising or just has stuck with you for some kind of reason?
God, there's lots of things.
You can also tell me more than one. It's okay. There's not like a hard and fast rule about one thing.
I remember the first winter I was playing football, I didn't understand why lots of people had carrier bags with them, or black bin bags. And we train outside, come rain or shine, we train. And I didn't know the rule, and I wanted to, like, I didn't even notice that people had them at first, I don't think. And I realised after training that it's because I picked up my bag afterwards and everything was soaking right inside. So my, like, warm layers to put on top were just dripping wet, which was not the best. We've had some, like, really fun socials and events. So a couple of members from our club, we had like it was 7 years of the club's existence, and we had like a birthday party for the club, and it was like a year 7 disco kind of vibe. And some people did a talent show, and there were people singing I Want It That Gay, a little spin on I Want It That Way. There were people singing original music, there were people juggling with footballs and doing keepy uppies and really cool stuff. But like the perfect anecdote that I have for the ethos and the culture within the club is there's this woman who really wanted to sing Babushka and only knew the chorus, which I think is fair to say most people only know the chorus, but she got up there and didn't realise how much first verse there was before the chorus, and she recently had an operation on her voice as well, on her throat, so her singing was like, she was really prepped and ready to go, but she had no idea what the first verse was, and the most amazing, just without blinking, like 5 people grabbed their phones and pulled up the lyrics, and one of the other people on the team like got up there with her phone and held it up, and they were singing along together and like swaying, and even with the lyrics up on the screen, like nobody really knew the words, everybody starts grabbing their phones out, starts singing along in the crowd. It was like such a beautiful experience, and like the biggest cheer. Like, there was this one person who did juggling with footballs and then keepy uppies in time to music, and it was a whole thing. That got a big cheer, but this moment got a way bigger cheer. Like, it was just everybody coming together to support one person in that moment, and that is exactly what it's like to be a part of Gold Diggers.
Brilliant. And final question. I need to find a better way of segueing into final question without saying it like that. I keep saying it, and it's like, it's not that it's not that intense. Why do you think that other queer and trans people should get into football?
I think queer and trans people who want to get into football definitely should. I held myself back from doing something that I have absolutely been loving and enjoying for so long, and my only regret with football is that I didn't allow myself to do it sooner, and be a part of the culture and community that I'm part of sooner. So if there's a queer or trans person out there who sees this and has always wanted to play football or any other sport or any other activity, but kind of there's something holding them back because they're unsure, I think the first step is to just try it and find the spaces where there is that for you. And there's so many things now, whether it's like a cross-stitch club or pottery courses or football teams, there's something for every interest, for every hobby, and there are spaces within that where queer and trans people are not just included, but they are celebrated. And if there's nothing like that near where you are, or you can't find those things, reach out to other people who have set those things up in their areas and work out how you can do it yourself. It's a great thing to be a part of, to have this sort of roaming community that goes from pitch to pitch and has all the fun. And like the ethos of the club is, our little slogan is availability, not ability. Like, we don't really care if we win or lose. Like, it'd be nice to win. It is nice when we win. But the idea is that we're doing this thing that we all really enjoy and we're doing it together. And if that sounds like something that you might be into as a queer or trans person, then do it.
Yeah. And we've been building our own spaces for as long as forever. I think we've probably just been like, oh, they're not letting the dominant mainstream whatever is not making space, fine, we'll make a space.
Yeah, that's how like queer and trans existence has always been. We've always found the spaces, we've always made the spaces, so I don't want that element of our sort of queer resistance to die. We should definitely keep doing that. I think eventually it would be nice to get to a place within society where we don't necessarily have to explicitly say like trans people are welcome and trans people can play with us, because it's ridiculous that that's even a point that has to be made. Because I would like to be in a position within society where it's assumed that trans people are always welcome in all spaces all the time. I just, living in the real world outside of the queer utopia that I live in, that's not the case. And until that is the case, we got to just keep making our spaces. Cool. And taking up spaces.
Love that. Cool. I mean, we're technically done, but is there anything that you feel like, oh man, I wish I'd have the chance to talk about this thing? Is there anything? If there's not, it's totally fine. But
The only thing I would say is it's an absolute abysmal state of society that the only representation for South Asian female football is a movie, Bend It Like Beckham. It's like one of the all-time greatest movies in my opinion, and then that movie came out in 2002 or 2003 maybe, but either way it feels like we haven't made progress since then. It feels like actually that movie could come out today and still be equally relevant in terms of the sexism, in terms of the racism, and you know, there wasn't any discussion of queerness within the football environment, but there were elements of homophobia within the movie that were sort of attempted to be tackled and challenged. And I think it's a real shame that it feels like for over 20 years things have been stagnant. So I guess let's just make sure the next 20 years aren't so stagnant.
I love that. That's perfect. I am now going to pause this.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.